So hello everyone, and welcome back to my 2-week live video challenge. And today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, which is how to deal with the inner critic. So it's that voice inside of our head that tells us that we're not doing a good enough job, that we're not pretty enough, we're not handsome enough, we're not smart enough. That kind of always decides to point out what's wrong with our life, as opposed to celebrating what we're doing well. And today I want to talk about one simple trick that you can do to help you start to deal with or start to work with the inner critic, and how to find more healing around this, more of a space of ease and freedom, as opposed to being confined by the inner critic. Because we all know what that's like. We can go through those days where we just are so hard on ourselves. We feel like we're never doing a good enough job. We feel like everything we do, we fail at. And it's hard to keep up your motivation, whether you're an entrepreneur or an employee or a student. Those days where you're hard on yourself, it's very hard to keep your motivation up, keep your self-confidence up. This applies not just to business and school, but also to personal life, things like dating and relationships. There's so much work that we can do around starting to change our frame of mind. How do we talk to ourselves? For me, a lot of what meditation is about changing the way that we talk to ourselves in our mind. So what is the internal dialogue all about? So for some people, this is called something like positive self-talk versus negative self-talk. There's a plane overhead, so I'll wait for that to go by. So this is, it's still going. One of the benefits of doing these live YouTube challenges is you get to see the real thing. So this is an unedited, live, raw take of the action. So I was saying that for me, meditation, a lot of it is about just changing the way that you're talking to yourself. So what are the words you're using to talk about your experience, to talk about what's going on? And a great way to check in on this is to see, if you talked to your friends the way you talk to yourself, do you think that would be appropriate? And normally when we start to actually look at the way we talk to ourselves, we see that we're being so harsh and so judgmental. The hardest part is actually just seeing it. This is a lot like asking a fish, how's the water? Because we've been swimming in this sea of our self-talk our whole life, so we don't even realize we're doing it. We don't even realize that there is self-talk most of the time. We just think we're seeing reality the way it is, not realizing that we're overlaying our reality with our perception and our judgment of things. And usually we're judging ourselves as being not good enough. Now some of this comes from evolutionary biology, the way we evolved. We have something called the negativity bias. So we evolved as a species to see what is wrong with our environment, rather than to see what is good about our environment. And there's very good reasons that this is the case. If we didn't have this negativity bias, we wouldn't have survived that long as a species. If you think about when we were cavemen or living on the safari and running from big predators, we needed to be constantly looking out for what was wrong with our situation or our environment. The same as when we evolved in tribal societies, as the way that chimps live or bonobos live. We lived in these social tribal communities where our social standing was very important. So we needed to be scanning the environment and saying, okay, what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong? What can I fix? The problem is this negativity bias is now on overdrive, where we're all the time looking out for what's wrong with our environment, and never actually, maybe not never, but very rarely are we appreciating what's going well. So what's the one trick? What's the one thing that you can start to do today to start to lessen the voice of the inner critic? The one thing that I'll say that helps, and it's the starting point for all the other techniques that we can do when dealing with the inner critic, is to start to be more aware of when the inner critic is present. And this is what mindfulness is about, just being aware when is it a voice of the inner critic? And it really helps to start labeling it. So when you notice that you're criticizing yourself, to just pause and say, oh, that's the inner critic. Or self-judgment. You can just say the words self-judgment as a way of kind of noting and labeling what it is that's going on. So this is a mindfulness technique. It's called mindfulness of thoughts. It's just kind of labeling the thought, noticing what's happening. And it really works wonders for the inner critic. One of the reasons that it works so well for the inner critic is that the moment you notice it, the moment you label it, it kind of pulls you out of that story. So instead of, you're kind of in that mode where you're judging yourself like, I'm not good enough, nobody likes me, I'm too awkward. And the moment you recognize and say, oh, inner critic, it pulls you out of being immersed in that story of being not good enough. So this is one of the reasons why it works so well. Oh, Dai Cup. I'm doing a live action shooting and we have guests. Say hi. So that's one of the reasons that that works so well, to do that mindfulness of thoughts. The other reason that works is that it actually down-regulates your amygdala. So your amygdala is like that fight or flight response. When you're really stressed or something is in your environment that you're afraid of, what happens is your amygdala lights up, and this is kind of the fight or flight response in the brain. They've done studies to show that when you do this labeling technique, when you can actually put kind of a word to the emotion that you're feeling, it down-regulates the amygdala and up-regulates your prefrontal cortex, giving you more of that kind of reasoning power. And so, I can say this all and it's all good, but I would say don't just trust me, but try it out. So for one day, see if the whole day you can just be noticing when is the inner critic speaking. And it really helps to also have a friend point it out. So, my friend Ermo, just in the cafe right now, I had said something that was slightly kind of judgmental of myself. And he pointed to me and he said, you're judging yourself. And it was really beneficial for me to have that kind of feedback in real life. Somebody saying, hey, check it out. You're judging yourself. You're criticizing yourself. So it's a great practice to do with a friend, to say, hey, I want to spend one day of really noticing when I'm being self-judgmental or self-critical. Can you help me out? Can you point it out when you see it happening? And that's one of the ways you can really stay on track with that. So that's my techniques, my tips for dealing with the inner critic. Again, the first, mindfulness, so just be aware of when you're being self-judgmental, using that mindfulness power, those mindfulness techniques. The second is to label it, so just say, oh, self-judgment, inner critic, whatever label helps you kind of frame it to see what's going on. So those are the two techniques. And then the third, which can really help, is to have a friend jump in and point it out for you. Of course, trying to do it in a kind way. Find a friend who can kind of say it with a smile and be like, hey, you're judging yourself. That really helps. So that's my video for today. Again, we're on day 1 of the 2-week YouTube video challenge. This has been a video about how to deal with the inner critic. If you liked it, please give me a thumbs up below. I'm new to this YouTube thing. I have no idea how YouTube works, but it's kind of fun. I think thumbs up helps. If you're not a subscriber, you can subscribe. It might be there or there. I don't really know. It's going to be somewhere. And you can share it with your friends if you found it useful. So that's it. Signing off. Day 1. Peace and love. See you guys later.